Welcome to the J.D. Levy and Associates Calibration Point Podcast. Our podcasts are designed to bring a conversational exploration of key topics that we believe will provide value and insight to those serving in the nonprofit sector. We will highlight new developments in the field, latest research, and things we're learning from our own clients that we can share. If there are topics that you would like to see explored, please send them to us through our website at jdlevyassociates.com.
Thank you for joining us today for another Calibration Point podcast. I'm excited to have with us as a guest today Candice Perry, who is a longtime life advocate, as we have put in the title of this podcast, journeying in lots of different roles in the nonprofit field. And the core of what we'll learn about today from her is how does that role of advocate change, and what is the impact that has on a nonprofit organization, having had experience as a frontline person, as an executive director, and now as a senior officer in a grant-making foundation. So Candice, could you open with a little bit of context to when we've talked about this being about being a life advocate and your journey? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, well, first off, thank you so much for this conversation. To just share a little bit more about that advocate role. In my former role before coming to the foundation, I spent 23 years in the nonprofit sector. In particular, I worked at a domestic violence and sexual assault agency. In the first 15 years, I did spend in direct service as a legal advocate. And every day I was seeking to ensure, in particular, those most vulnerable knew their options, were informed, had their voices heard. I'd strive to defend and safeguard their rights and have their views and wishes genuinely considered when decisions were made about them. And as I stepped into the role of executive director for the 8 years thereafter, I maintained that posture of advocate, working with a broader audience in the community. I would often say that the title I held was executive director, but who I was an advocate. I recognized that this role of nonprofit excellence officer with the foundation, there was an opportunity to really step into an advocacy role on a different platform and to perhaps influence philanthropy and to see that nonprofits gained what they needed to succeed, to be a cheerleader for the community to come alongside nonprofits.
One of the things that I talk a lot about, and you've heard me say this as well as our listeners, the idea that being an advocate, the derivative of that word actually comes from the idea of pleading on behalf of and interceding on something that you care about. And it's pretty fascinating that you've been able to go from a cause-driven organization in which you served as an intercessor, as an advocate for the people you were serving every day, to now being in a grant-making foundation in which you're upholding the entire nonprofit sector as a whole. What do you think, what stands out to you? What's been the biggest challenge, adjustment, hurdle, whatever we'd like to call it, as you've made this transition from direct service into being now in a grant-making role?
Mm-hmm. I often say that I have taken that experience of those 23 years and I've brought it into this new experience and this new role. And there has been so much that I use to translate and to help inform. But the most difficult adjustment was, there's some obvious adjustments. There was that moving from a very crisis-driven environment, noise and urgency every day, to this very quiet, focused, measured environment where the pace was and is definitely different. And the language is so different for me. There's a particular vernacular within the philanthropy realm. And but I'll say too that on a very real and personal level. I had to deal with a different identity, who I was, and to really face some fears that I had. Fear of being perceived as maybe knowing or achieving a certain excellence, that I just wanted people to know that I was still figuring all of this out as well. And so in my vulnerability, I do have to say that I've had those moments of just that, the fear of the expectation that others might have of me, moving from nonprofit to.
It's interesting you point out the expectation, something that we talk a lot about with grant makers and as well as nonprofit organizations, that there's often an expectation that is unwritten that nonprofit organizations hold onto themselves, that they believe that a lot of times funders are holding and imposing over them. And so I want to kind of jump onto that idea of expectations. Are there, or is there, one key thing that now in this role that you wish or you would want or you believe that other grant makers or philanthropists ought to understand about working with their grantees, working with potential nonprofit providers in the community, that as you've made this transition, has there been something that you've taken from your former life as an executive director that you've said, yeah, this is what other funders need to understand if they're going to work in healthy partnerships, in healthy relationships with nonprofit organizations in the realm of their grant making?
Yeah, I think nonprofit leaders really appreciate the ways in which philanthropy is or has been shifting. I think that there are many of our nonprofit leaders who are sharing that they feel that there's some momentum towards building communication and relationship. I think nonprofit leaders that I've been in touch with, and from my own experience, we would want philanthropists to really seek to understand themselves. Are they going to be relationship based? What is the what is the directive of intent for their giving? Nonprofit leaders, they want to build their organizations to be healthy organizations, and so there's that real interest in getting to know the funder and wanting to know how the funder wants to help them become as healthy as possible. And one aspect of that is capacity building and the desire to really build their skills, build the leadership within, to develop their infrastructure. And many leaders would want philanthropy and funders to really, I think, explore, are they able, are they willing to really give core and essential long-term funding? Do they see it as a strategy within their own giving?
So a really good point. There was some research that came out recently by some of the largest foundations in the country, basically highlighting their philosophy that they're going to focus on capacity building. They're going to focus on long-term relationships with grantees. And the point they were making was that if you really want to create change, the funding world has to start to invest in longitudinal partnerships. The fascinating thing, I think, in your role, being now the Senior Nonprofit Excellence Officer at the Welborn Baptist Foundation and being one of the largest funders in your entire region, and your previous role getting to see that foundation from the field perspective. And one thing I think that you've inherited and that you've also been instrumental in driving is the desire of now the Welborn Baptist Foundation to develop in long-term relationships that create change. And you guys have been recognized by Stanford for various things that you've done. And it's fascinating to see that now the field is saying, yes, we do need to invest in long-term partnerships, and we need to build long-term equity with the grantees that we want to make a difference through. And communities win when funders take that approach. Now kind of flipping that perspective, Candice, I would be curious for our listeners if you could maybe think about this from the other side of that token and that coin in a sense. And that is, are there a couple of things now that you wish that you knew when you were an executive director in working with major funders, or I should say even large or small funders or individual philanthropists that you've been able to take away now saying, wow, I wish I had more clarity on this when I was an executive director?
Yeah, it's such a good question. In looking back, I think that I probably would have spent more time getting to know the funder as whether or not they are relationship based, just communicating more to help inform, being an advocate for that funder, to let that funder know what was happening, not only in my organization, but the sector, perhaps.
Yes.
I think that I probably approached the foundation in my previous life as I wanted to comply. I wanted to please. I wanted to show that what they were investing in was succeeding. And I think that in hindsight, what I was overlooking was that opportunity to seek them as a thought partner, as a strategy partner, and to really be in real time discussion about what's happening, what's working, what's not, being very transparent. I felt back then that I was being transparent, but as I look back, I think I was eager to share the good and less eager to share the hardship. And I could have been an advocate even more so in those conversations.
It's an excellent perspective. And what I take from that is the understanding of mutuality and true partnership. And from a service provider's perspective, that the funding community can be a partner and that you can be an asset to them in relationship in helping them to be a sense maker and framer, as well as then they can speak into the sandbox that you're in and share the things that they're learning as well. Good perspectives, Candice. This is a unique journey. I mean, the idea of how few people get to work in a foundation to begin with, and then someone who was in the field on the front lines and then became an executive director, and then being able to go from there into a senior officer role is a fascinating journey that I think all of us can learn from. So Candice, we really appreciate your time today. For all of our listeners, again, this is Candice Perry with the Welborn Baptist Foundation. If you get a chance, you want to learn more about them, please feel free to go to their website. Candice, thank you for your time, and I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thanks for listening to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point Podcast. If you have comments or ideas for future episodes, please reach out using the contact page on our website, jdlevyassociates.com.